כל הכל יספר לבד נשמוס ובית מצדוקה וכל הסגוס נשמוס בלי נדר גנד אתם מנחוסי תוך רבה רוח מייסטר ועשי סגנות ולא ויצרו בצורה חיים וסשמוסו ידעינו לך כלוסוי נח בשלום משקומי ונועים הרומי אמן
You didn't finish the Mishnayos, you can't have dessert. Please finish by dessert.
Take of your.
No? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Glassman.
It's a pleasure. It's the greatest.
Save me. לא תתני אנווה דהי כהנא, אמר לי רב נחמן נתן לא תתני יראת חטא דהי כהנא. אז רן הלך עגלה ערופה בסריקה למסכת סודה, אז רן הלך עגלה ערופה בסריקה למסכת סודה, אז רן הלך עגלה ערופה בסריקה למסכת סודה. אמרו לו הוקים הנפותנו, הוקים הנפותנו, אז רן הלך אלוהן אלוקים בסריקה למסכת מכות, אז רן הלך אלוהן אלוקים בסריקה למסכת מכות, אז רן הלך אלוהן אלוקים בסריקה למסכת מכות.
אל תקראי לקסך אל הקודש הבוך על ארץ כמה וכמה. הדרון הלוך חמה בקודש הסקר במסכת חגיגה, הדרון הלוך חמה בקודש הסקר במסכת חגיגה, הדרון הלוך חמה בקודש הסקר במסכת חגיגה. הדרון הלוך. הדרן
לך מסכת סוטה והדרן לך דעתך מסכת סוטה ודעתך עליו לא תנשי מינך מסכת סוטה ולא תנשי מינך לא בעלמא הדרן עליו לא בעלמא דעס
הדרן הלוך מסכת
סוטה והדרן לך דעתך עליו מסכת סוטה ודעתך עליו מסכת סוטה ולא תנשי בעלמא הדרן הלך מסכת סוטה
לא, משתתף בקדוש ותירום חיסוני. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו חלקך, אמן, אמן, אמן צלווי. מועדים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו לעשייה.
מה לא יחצי מהם, אני אפתח.
יהי רצון
לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו, שבזאת תסיים מסכת סוטה, כיצד זו להכין מסכת סוסים אחרים לסיים לשמור לעשות וקיים את כל דברי
גם כל את הדבר ברור. עד אלו, כן, בי. אדיני, אוי, דמייתי, אוי, ושלוי.
Amen.
יש ברוך ישתבח סבב סלב סלב שני דקצ'וב כל בחסר כשעשה תשבח זה מחוסר לאמורן בלמובים רומי ישראל ועל רבנה ועל תלמידיהם ועל כל תלמידינו וכל מה נעסקים ועשתי ועשרתי וכל עשר ועשר גדע וכל שברו ואחרנו וחסר ורחם חי ורחם וחיים וחיים וכבוד משמע ורבים רומים יש לנו רבם שמיים וחיים טובים עליהם ועל כל ישראל רומים
Amen. Amen. Good.
L'chaim to everybody, l'chaim l'kulam, l'chaim Shifra, l'chaim to all the kids, l'ilun nishmat, Rabbi Kadosh, v'cheskel Isser, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe.
Chaim.
The Baal HaTanya writes in Siman Chamzayin, the Geras HaKodesh, that on the Yortzeit of a tzaddik, all of the Ma'asim Tovim, all the Limud HaTorah that he has done during the time of his life, have an aliyah to the higher world. And most important, he says, it's Poel Yeshuas B'Kerev Aretz. And everything that he's done has a great effect on this physical world. Because after all of the great masim that he's done were done here in this world. And ultimately, when Mashiach is going to come very soon, the Gili Elokus, the accomplishments of everything that we've done here, is going to be revealed down here. So on the day that a tzaddik passes away, you see the accomplishments that it's Poel Yeshuas B'Kerev Aretz. Specifically, he says, amongst the Talmidim and the people that were close to him during the time that he was alive. And he says a big chiddush. He says, even after he passed away, people that choose to follow in his footsteps also have a chance to receive a ha'ara, a shine from his nefesh, ruach, and neshama, from his neshama. And it's Poel Yeshuas B'Kerev Aretz, and it brings a bracha for the families and Klal Yisrael. So l'chol harosh, we have to say a bracha that all of the great simcha that Uncle Chezi brought to all of us, the family and the friends, and all of the mitzvahs that he did with such an open heart, such a huge lev hazahav, should be Poel Yeshuas B'Kerev Aretz, and most importantly, v'achai yiten eliboy, that all of us should continue to emulate Chezi's memory. Tomorrow, which is Monday, the day of the yahrzeit, Vav Shvat, is the minhag is each day to learn a part of the parsha. So tomorrow we learn from Sheni till Shlishi. And one of the interesting things, it's a short parsha, but it's a short aliyah. But one of the interesting things is that when Moshe Rabbeinu tells Am Yisrael, Al tiro, don't fear, Isyatzu ur'u es Yeshuas Hashem. They saw Paroi and the Mitzrayim coming after them, after Klal Yisrael. Don't worry, Hashem yilachem lachem va'atem tacharishum. So the famous medrash about there were 4 groups in Am Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu was essentially responding to the 4 groups. There was one group that saw the Mitzrayim coming. They said, let's go back to Mitzrayim. What are we doing over here? Hamebli and Kvarim b'Mitzrayim? Let's go back. Another group said, let's dive into Hashem. To that, Moshe Rabbeinu said, V'atem tacharishun. To the people that said, let's have Mulchama against the Mitzrayim, Hashem yilachim lachem. And finally, there was a group of people that said that they wanted to give up Rahman al-Islam and jump into the Yam Suf. They didn't know where they were. They saw behind the Mitzrayim, in front they see the Yam Suf. So there wasn't really much of a choice. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu say? We know what not to do. None of those 4 groups. What should they do? In the beginning of the Aliyah of Shlishi, it says that Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Daber o bnei Yisrael v'yiso. Speak to them, they should travel, they should go. Hatzivui shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Am Yisrael, Masha Hashem Omer, kacha tzarich la'asot. V'yiso. In other words, the common denominator between the first 4 groups is that each one had their own ideas, their own ulterior motives in what to do and how to proceed. And Hashem told Moshe to tell Am Yisrael that at this time, it's a time of need. The fire is burning, we have to move. You have to listen. Whatever the Eibusha tells us, so travel. At every given moment, I will tell you what to do. Just listen. And at this time when the Golus is so strong, and especially days like this when we are reminded so vividly of how difficult the Golus is, I don't think we have to go into details in how the different groups are translated today. But everyone, leaving maybe some food for thought, how different ideas that might come up by us or by different people, on how to combat the terrible darkness of this galus. But at the end of the day, the instruction from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe Rabbeinu then is live and standing today too. Daber al bnei Yisrael v'yiso. Travel. We have to listen to what the Torah says. Sometimes we have feelings that try to get in the way. But whatever these feelings are, we have to put them aside. And we have to remember, v'yiso, we have to move on. And Be'ezus Hashem, through this Hayrah, through this lesson of listening clearly to what the Torah says, to what the Rabbanim tell us to do, this is the way that we are going to go out of this galus, just like Am Yisrael went out of Mitzrayim in its time.
Good, good.
צריכים לנסוע, אפילו אם לנסוע.
אני לא שבאת.
One of the yonim, we're getting together at the yard site, speaking about the qualities of the nifter, besides the aliyas neshama issue that people, which in this case might not even apply, according to many people, the person who died is a kadosh. But this Yechezkel is someone who we can learn so much from, and every year this has been the ongoing tradition, especially the more Hamish Suda that we've been having the last few years here in the house. We've been discussing, we've been talking about different attributes, and there's so many things to talk about, without even any embellishment, things that are real as a person. It's very funny because people have asked me many times over the years. I meet people and talk to me, Yechezkel, you knew Yechezkel, wow, how long do you go back? And it's it's interesting that I think altogether, I just made a cheshbon this past week. I think I knew Yechezkel, the first time I ever met him, we had even a discussion, was maybe 26 months before, 2 years and 2 months before the tragedy happened. So I didn't really know him beforehand, except for he was famous, the person going through the streets saying "Bitachon lifnei ason," right? I knew of him, but we didn't have at that time a relationship. When he had called me to, it's interesting because I put an ad I put up a sign in Boston about starting a Daf Yomi shir early in the morning. My wife had just given birth to twins, and I realized I wasn't going to sleep past 6 o'clock in the morning. And instead of just kvetching and turning over again and trying to go to sleep for 4 or 5 times, I said, why don't you do something with your time and get up and what? Get out of the house. Right? My wife will handle that shift. And so I put up a sign, and I had a few people. Actually, there were 3 people who had called me, and the 4th person to call was Yechezkel. Called me about sure. Now, the truth is, I had met him once before, like a few weeks before, on the bus. Interesting. Before that, I had actually met him. I had sat, I think, behind him in a bus, and he was talking to somebody. He was upset about something, and when Yechezkel was upset about something, everyone knew about it. And so he was making us, and I said something to him. He turned back, and he was explaining to me why whatever he was doing had to be done. I don't remember the issue, but it was like 2 weeks before. And I guess maybe I introduced myself then, and then it was 2 weeks later, so he called the number, and then afterwards we came. The shir started with 4, and eventually the shir became 1. The Daf Yomi didn't work. It wasn't a group that we could do a Daf Yomi. It wasn't a group we could do even Amid Yomi with. But it turned in from Daf Yomi to Amid Yomi. It eventually came a Seder Mishnayos, which we carried on for about 21 months. And one of the things, though, I just have to stress it again, because Motzi Shabbos, this Motzi Shabbos, I realized it's unbelievable how old you could be. 20 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, 80 years old. The issue of time management is something. I just 1 or 2 minutes want to speak before I introduce our speaker. They just had now in the Chadarim, they just had an exam, a test on Dinei Shvius. They the test, Degli Yerushalayim, a wonderful organization. It's unbelievable. Thousands of Yaldei Yisrael were just tested on a large portions of Dinei Shvius. And it's unbelievable. And it's been around for 30 years. And my son was very, very excited about it. The problem was, because he's in Kita Ches and there's so many other things to learn, they start to prepare them for Yeshiva Katana. So this was put on the back burner. And it came, was Motzi Shabbos, the test is tomorrow. It was really Friday, he told me, Erev Shabbos. Test is, what are we going to do? And it was unbelievable. But the whole Erev Shabbos, Leil Shabbos, Motzi Shabbos, Baruch Hashem, today in the morning, got up early, we were able to finish, Baruch Hashem, prepare him for the Bechina. And I came to realize, I was thinking about the things that you can accomplish when you know how to make use of your time. Erev Shabbos and Friday night, Motzi Shabbos. And there's so much you can accomplish. And I was thinking about Yecheskel. It's unbelievable. A person, anyone knows his background, and Reb David is a person who goes back with him from his beginnings. He could certainly tell us much more about this. But Yecheskel, it's fascinating what he was able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. This storm that he had, a Seder Mishlei, the Seder Mishlei, a 15-minute Seder on the bus, every day consistently, went over tons of time, say for Mishlei, and going through Tanakh and Mishnayos. And this is him, and you don't understand, this is a person, time was essential. He had it all worked out to include the family life, the amount of time he spent. He never was mevater. When it came with the cheshbon of the family always came first. And it meant, but he wasn't mevater on the Seder. If it meant a long day at work and he had to take care of things at home, if it's 11:30, he would call me up. I would be in my pajamas. He said, "Get out, we have to learn." We didn't learn today. It was really, it was for the most consistent Seder I ever had in my life. And I think it's a big chizuk thing to all of us, that it's a thing that we have to think about in making a change. This week's parsha, Chodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodoshim. It's a big chiddush of Yitzias Mitzrayim that the Sforno writes over there. The Sforno says that time is now given over to you. We have the Bechira Chavshis. When we were Mitzrayim, we were totally subjugated, and we didn't have time on our hands. We couldn't do what we wanted to do. Be able to manage our time is a very, very chashuv thing, and I think it's a lesson that we should, in the memory of Yecheskel Zechor Levracha, it should be for us. We could all start again, even now, to think about it, how we could arrange and we could make best use of our time. And Baruch Hashem, we're zocheh to have with us David Orlovsky, who's been with us almost every year, but it's great to have him back. And I'd like to say a few words to close.
Right. Gemara tells the story of one of the great Chazal who was sent up to Shemayim, and they said, "What did you see?" He says, "Olam hafach ra'isi." I saw an upside down world. And that's why I think it's so ironic that those of us in the cheap seats are now in the front. You never know where life is going to take you. It has little ups and downs. I was just reflecting on this as you were talking, how long I know Yecheskel. Me and my wife were married for about 2 months when we met Yecheskel in 1982 as a teenager. And I'm reminded of a story when my friend Menachem Nissel was with Rav Moshe Shapiro, and Rav Moshe Shapiro said, "Ata zocher kasher hayita Manny?" So he says, "Ken, ata zocher kasher Shmuel haya Steve? Ken, ata zocher kasher haya Andy? Ken, the good old days." So I remember Scotty. What can I tell you? I've never been real good at that. I have all my friends from yeshiva who, when they were there, they had all these English names. Then they all found religion later in life. And I come out and I was like, oh yeah, Steve's here. Steve. You mean Reb Shmuel? Yeah. I always used to love that guy. Reb Noach Weinberg always used to love the shock value because I was with my brother Jack. You know my brother Jack, right? He was Rosh Yeshiva Bnei Yisrael. My brother Jack, you know. So what can I say? I remember Scotty, you know. And in 1982, it was a long time. I know him longer than I would say almost all of his immediate family. I would say, but and I got some great Scotty stories. But the truth is, I used to teach Parsha in Or Sameach 5 times a week, and a guy once observed, "How is it that you give 5 Parsha shirim and you don't get out of the first pasuk?" So one time he said to me, "It's not true. It's not true. I made a mistake." And ve'ela mishpatim, you gave 5 shirim, you never get out of the vav. I said, well, there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say, a lot of observations. So I thought to myself, my Rebbe Olowik, I know a lot of people say my Rebbe Olowik, but he really was my Rebbe. He was my Bekias Rebbe in Chavetz Chaim in 1975. I always like to tell that over to point out how old he is. So, because he has this sort of youngish pixie face, I want to point out it's an illusion. But he exercises a lot. He told me the doctor told him, "You're too busy not to exercise." I didn't listen to him like I haven't done a lot of things, but it is an interesting observation. But anyway, so he says to me, "You're not considered a rabbi unless whatever you're saying you tie into the Parshas HaShavua." So I said, "Oh gosh, I'm going to speak about this guy. I've spoken about him so many times." Now the truth is, I've been Yerush this spot because when Scotty's father died, he used to bring me out every year around this time to speak at his Yerutzeit. And then I just sort of shifted over one spot, you know. So I started speaking at his Yerutzeit, but I got it by Yerusha. So I think to myself, you know, I've spoken so many times, you know, what's in the parasha? And I said, Vayi v'shalach paro. And I suddenly remember a shmuz I heard from Tzvi Kushalevsky. Vayi v'shalach paro. When Paro sent out Bnei Yisrael. Doesn't that sound nice? Paro says, you know what? Why don't you guys go? Why don't you go? After I destroyed your water supply, destroyed your crops, after I smashed your houses, killed your livestock, and murdered most of your children, why don't you go? You understand? Go. So the Medrash says that Moshe wouldn't leave until Paro gave him permission to go. The emes says we could have left any time we wanted, and who's going to stop me? You know? Take your best shot. Evidently it was possible. Bnei Ephraim came out 30 years beforehand. But Moshe says, no, I'm going to wait till Paro says we can go. So he says, go. I said, oh, all right, if that's how you feel. If you want us to go, we'll go, no problem. You know? Just waiting for you to ask, you know. And the Medrash goes on to say that a Talmud Chacham without derech eretz nevela tavas chaymen. A Talmud Chacham without derech eretz, a dead carcass of an animal is greater than him. What a strange way of saying it. So Tzvi brought a brisker Rav to say the following. There's a concept of hierarchy. Yeah? Those of us who played 20 questions, so in the old way, the old Girsa, you always used to start animal, mineral, or vegetable. Right? Mineral, we call it a domain. Vegetable, we call it someach. An animal, we call it a chai. And that's where they stop. We add on another level a medaber, which is a human being. On top of that is a Yisrael. And on top of that is a Talmud Chacham. That's the hierarchy of existence. Yeah? Now, when something that has chiyus dies, it doesn't stay in its status. It falls lower than the status it was in. So therefore, a domain, a rock, when it dies, it does not have any tumah, because it doesn't really die. right? It wasn't really alive in that sense. Yeah? One could argue it's someach when it dies. At least it can be makabel tumah. An eitz can be makabel tumah. An animal, when it dies, becomes a nevela. It's now a source of tumah. When a Yisrael dies, it's aviyavos tumah. So what happens when a Talmud Chacham dies? It moves all the way down lower than what it's supposed to be. When I say die, I don't mean die in the physical sense. I mean, he doesn't become what a Talmud Chacham is supposed to be, which means derech eretz. And that's why it says, a Talmud Chacham without derech eretz, nevela tevascha. Why? Because a nevela doesn't cause as much tumah as it does when it falls down. For 15 years, 16 years, I don't know exactly the count, I've been giving a shir every other Motzi Shabbos in Har Nof. Something that I am eminently unqualified to do. And there have been various people in the community who have pointed this out to me. Where they say, who are you that you're giving a shir? Why should someone like you give a shir? Well, you're such a big Talmud Chacham. I should be giving that shir. I said, you're right. You're right. I guess you're just such an unav that people don't appreciate your greatness. You really should, do more to make yourself known, But, and I said, kol kavod, if anybody wants to listen to you, I think that's great, but what can I do? Nobody wants to listen to you. So they want to listen to me, Not because I'm qualified. But there was one time when I came up with a question, and occasionally I try to find questions that nobody talks about. And as my wife, who is the intellectual of the family, is frantically looking up sources, she will occasionally look at me with a sense of exasperation and say, did it ever occur to you that there's a reason that nobody ever asked this question? So it leaves me room to say whatever I want. That's what's nice about it. But, when you're looking around, and sometimes, you're not finding anything. So I have a number of Talmidei Chacham that I consult and ask opinion. Every now and then I say, can I say the following? And they say, you can say anything. I wouldn't say it, but you can say it. So one time I was complaining to one of these people, and I said, listen, I'm really not qualified to do this. So I said, I'm not big enough to do this. He says, oh, then you should be very happy, because small people don't mess things up. Only big people do. Yeah? There's only so far that you can damage if you're a small person. But the bigger you are, then the mistakes that you make have cosmic consequences. Yeah? According to the Gemara, how come Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai did not ask Vespasian to spare the Beis HaMikdash? The Gemara gives two terutzim. The second teretz is he made a mistake. HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed him to make that mistake. He closed off that level as a punishment for us. What that means is that Rav Yochanan and Zakkai would have asked Paro, would have asked Vespasian, don't destroy the Beis HaMikdash. He wouldn't have. He wouldn't have. Big people make mistakes. They have major consequences. Small people make mistakes. It doesn't have the same level. So that's why little kids are always falling down. They don't seem to suffer the way as big people do when they fall down. That's because they're closer to the ground. So they don't have that far to fall. You know what I mean? People who are bigger they are, the harder they fall. Yeah? That phrase was originally coined by Moshe Rabbeinu when he knocked down Og. But we don't know that. But we don't realize that Og, Uga is a cake, Og is a cookie. And that's where the expression comes from. That's the way the cookie crumbles. But in any event, when the bigger you are, the more damage you do. Yeah? And so you can only do so much damage. A Talmud Chacham who doesn't have derech eretz, the damage that he does is much worse than the tumah of an avela. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was not going to leave without permission. Because it's not nice. It's not covered. I was thinking of this yesterday. I spoke about this idea. Yeah? The pasuk says you can't hate the Mitzri. Look, Ta'ev. You shouldn't be disgusted by the Mitzri. Because when you need a place to live, they gave you a place to live. Says Rashi, even though they took your children and drowned them in the river. But nonetheless, they wouldn't. I had to give you a place to live. You really want to live under those circumstances, you know what I mean? I have a nice apartment, but we're going to come in every now and then and and murder people, Otherwise, it's a nice place, But you see that that they did something good for you. So it's a derech eretz. There's a way to talk. There's a way you speak. Moshe Rabbeinu was very careful throughout how he spoke to Paro, how he approached him. And without that derech eretz, without that sense of respect, Scotty was, Yechezkel was always machabed people. As Rabbi Alphabon pointed out, he didn't always agree with them, and sometimes quite strongly. But he had a concept of kavod abrius. A concept. I've said this in past years, but I think it bears repetition. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who was part of John F. Kennedy's White House, he wrote a history of the administration. And he quoted John F. Kennedy one time as saying, I used to read the stories about FDR and his cabinet, and and Perkins, and and all the different people there. They were legends. And now I realize they were just people like me and you. So some people may argue, okay, Arthur Schlesinger and JFK weren't just regular people either. But what he means is, we looked at these people as if they were legends. I started with an observation. Olam hafach re'isi. We don't know down here what a person's value is. We don't know what actions we do have profound consequences. Rabbi Leff asked the kasha, and he gave 3 terutzim. I told him I like the third one best. That's the only one I'm going to give you. Yeah? The famous Chazal. Yeah? If Reuven would have known that the Torah wrote that he saved Yosef, he would have carried him home to his father on the shoulders. If Aaron would have known that it said that he was Somach Beliboy when he went to see Moshe, he would have come with a band. If Boaz would have known that they pointed out that we did something special, gave Rus this meal, he would have given a Suda Shlomo HaMelech. So what does that mean? If he would have known? I mean, if he would have known. Well, we don't always realize this. I was at a bar mitzvah once, and we were davening, and I was just about to say Kriya Shema, and the video camera comes right out. Boy, did I say a Shema. For the camera. Shema. It's not a Shema. It wasn't an epic. This Brisker was sitting next to a Breslov on a plane. I don't even have to say anymore. I mean, that's it. Just the setup alone, And the Breslov goes, nah! And Brisker goes, shh! He goes, nah, nah! The Brisker goes, shh! He goes, nah, nah, Nachman! He goes, shh! He goes, nah, nah, Nachman, my woman! He goes, shma! That's an epic shema. It wasn't epic. I said a really good shema. And I took off my hand and the camera was going. My first thought was, wasted a perfectly good Kriya Shema. But the emphasis, is being filmed all the time. Everything's being recorded. So if Reuven would have known that it was being written in the Torah, if he would have known that the camera was going, so Rabbi Leff made a brilliant observation. Yeah? Yitzchak was 75 years old when his father died. I assume they had many conversations during those 75 years. The Gemara says that Yitzchak learned in the yeshiva of Avram Avinu, which probably didn't have a very large sevet, since Yitzchak was the only pupil. Yeah? And he was learning. Yeah. And I assume they had many conversations. The Torah records one. Dad, where's the sheep? You're the sheep. That's it. I don't know anything else that Avram and Yitzchak ever said to each other in the Torah. even though they had many conversations over 75 years. How much of what we say and do is significant? Reuven didn't realize, Aaron, Boaz, they didn't realize that what they were doing was of such cosmic consequences that the Torah was going to record it. And if they did, if they understood that what they were doing had import. Somebody once said a gadol is not someone who does big things. A gadol is somebody who whatever he does it big. There's a big difference. You know? I had the schus to have Reb Chaim Kreisworth living in my building. When he said hello to you, you felt like you were the most important person in the world. That was it. There was nothing else in the world that he had. I would go to see my Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Henech Leibowitz in Chavetz Chaim, and he had this technique. I fell for it every time because it seemed so sincere. Yeah, I'd come in and he'd say, "Oh, Reb David, I don't know what to do." So what do you mean? I'm trying to open up this branch, and I don't know what's going to be with this, etc. And I gave him my advice, and he talked it through with me a little bit, and he was like, that's a good idea. Shneich, what can I do for you? Now, it must have been a technique, because I don't really think he needed my input on this, you know what I mean? But I felt like, $1 million. It was only one time I spoke to him that I didn't feel like I had his full attention, and I was a little hurt. I told this guy afterwards, and he said to me, "Oh, I guess you didn't know. He was going in later in the day for an operation. He was in terrible pain. But he didn't want to cancel the appointment because he didn't want to disappoint you."
Wow.
So if you didn't have his full attention, yeah, you can understand why. He canceled all his other appointments. So, you would think, I'm taking out time to speak to a kid. But I'm going to make that person feel like the most important person in the world. It's the little, and so, Olam Hafach Re'isi, when you get to Shemayim, do I know which actions I did were of cosmic consequence? Do I know which things I said and which things I did that made such a difference? Talmid Chacham b'li derech eretz. It's worse than Am Haaretz without derech eretz. Because the Torah itself becomes tamei and people look at it and say, how could it be? When you had somebody like Yechezkel, who would be mechabed people and make them feel important, and whether it was some kid who was in trouble, or a neighbor, or the community rabbi, or whoever it was, and he could approach them with a level of kavod, and I have to say, very often we get more schar for what we don't say than what we do say, Before his father passed away, he had gone on a very strict diet. He had lost 67 pounds, if I remember the number correctly. And someone came to pay a shiva call, and they said to him, your dad lived to 67. Maybe if you lost more weight, he would have lived longer. That, I tell you, of insensitive, inappropriate comments, I think that one stands on a pedestal all of its own, I remember he said it over to me, and he was just like, and he was like and I said, "What'd you say?" He says, "I didn't say anything." What was I going to say? "You're an idiot?" What kind of a moronic statement is that to say to somebody who's sitting like you're responsible for his death because you didn't lose more weight? What a bizarre thing to say. So what was I going to do? Make him feel bad? Insult him? He shared it with me because he knew that I would use it later in the speech. So I don't have that problem. When I get there, everyone will know where I belong. But anyway, but it's like Arthur Schlesinger just said. We look at people who we think are ordinary, and we don't know that they're extraordinary until we get to Olam Haba and we see an Olam Hafach. Until we think the people that we, think are the most important, perhaps are not. And the people who we may take for granted as regular, everyday people are exceptional people. And Schiffer said this every year. We always talk about it. So I want people to be able to take something, from Yecheskel's life, etc. And if we have to focus on one thing, Mishalach is I'm waiting for power to give me permission. I'm waiting that I understand there's a concept of derech eretz. And you can disagree. You sure did. You're going to disagree with that. But we have to be able to approach it in a way that we are mechabed the person. I want to tell a story just about my brother for a moment, because it is so out of character for an Orlovsky that it's just an inspiration to me. Yeah, my brother went to a Gateway Shabbaton, and he says he came a little late, and he was sitting in the back. And these two guys are talking through the laning, and he couldn't hear. Now, my brother usually says he usually come early. I sit up front. These two guys are talking, so I said, please, I can't hear the laning. He said, okay. They stopped for a minute. And then they went back to talking. So my brother said to them, you came to a Gateway Shabbaton because you're looking for inspiration. Please, you're not supposed to talk during the lighting. He said, okay. And they stopped for another few seconds, and then they went. My brother said to me, now I started to get angry. Now by Orlovsky, that means only one thing. Yeah. But my brother's, So he turns to these two guys and he says, I'm a Kohen. In the schus of your not talking during davening, I give you a bracha that you should have a very large parnasa this year. And they stopped talking. And after davening, one of them came over to him and said, you think all I care about is money? To which I would have responded, obviously it was the only thing that got you, shut up! And my brother said, no, but I knew a person like you would know how to use the money that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you to help Klal Yisrael.
Oh, sure.
You understand how with a few kind words, with a few kind observations, you can change somebody's life around. That was one of the gifts that Yecheskel had. To be able to go and take people who were often, a klishava. People who might be shattered. People who, and with a warm, sincere smile and with a kind word was able to change the metzius. We often can do nothing. Every now and then people call me up about certain problems with their kids. And they say, Orlovsky, can you help me? I said, no, but I can sit on the phone and cry with you because that's all I got for you. I don't have any solutions. But at least that much I can do. Say, oh, m'chavera. I can give you a few warm words. I can say a few nice things. And you don't know the power of a nice word, a kind word, and a little derech eretz, how far it can go. How far it can go. How many kids have stories of rebbeim who said terrible things to them and how it hurt them later in life. I heard a story once about a rebbe who he had a kid in class, and the kid said something really mechutza. Really mechutza. And the rebbe paused and looked at him and said, I asked Mechila. The kid said, for what? I must have done something really bad to you if you could talk to me that way. And I really apologize. I'll try to be better. He said, no, ani lo beseder. Look, can you read? Lo asiti. What I'm supposed to do. I didn't do the right thing. Because if I had been treating you right, you could never have spoken to me that way. It's so easy to break people. They used to say about the Alto Slobodka, you know how to take somebody apart and put them back together. Today we're half as good. Putting people back together, Humpty Dumpty doesn't glue back together so easily, although people are so fragile. And a kind word and a smile and a concern, and little acts of kindness for which Yecheskel is so well remembered, has the ability to be able to change people's lives and to be able to change Klal Yisrael. I went to see Pullman right after 9/11, that's Sukkot. He was nifta shortly afterwards. And I said to him, Rebbe, what's going on? He said, David, this is Gog. I said, so what do we do? He says, there's only two tools that we have, only two weapons that we have. Torah, Limud HaTorah, and Chesed. And he pauses and he says, but for this milchama, they're reversed. Chesed comes first. The kind word and the smile and the little gesture is going to do more to be able to take us out of this terrible matzav than anything else that we have. All the Torah without derech eretz is not going to be able to save us from becoming a nevela chas v'shalom. The way for us to be able to survive and to grow and to thrive is only from the acts of kindness. In Mirza Hashem, tonight, as we remember our friend Cheskel, Scotty, and all the impact he had in such a short period of time, and so many people, in so many ways that he affected the world. So all of us should remember that, it takes little things, to be able to make a change, to make the world a different place.